So we're going to go over the button items in this top row here for Autolaser. The first button is for zooming in, and it will zoom in wherever your cursor is set. You can adjust that and it will change where it's focused on. Now you can scroll in and out. The problem is when you scroll back out, it doesn't keep the focus. So the frame button is what allows you to zoom out to whatever size your drawing area is. I typically have it set for my table area, which is 900 by 600. And that zooms back out to that full size. The adaptive will zoom in to all the objects that are on your table. We'll zoom into those, whatever the focus is. So if you actually take this one out here and drag it across over here, click adaptive, it's only going to zoom in as far as to all the objects will fit in. You can also move. I don't use this very often. It's much quicker and easier to either go to frame or adaptive. Group does exactly what it says. You can do a selection, so we can drag for a selection. Whatever's in that box completely will be selected. So I can select these two objects, but if I only select part of one, if you don't get all the nodes, it won't select that object. So we're going to select these two objects, and we're going to group them together, but watch what happens. You won't notice it at first. So it doesn't look like anything's changed, except over here, one of our layers is gone. Layer 4 is gone, and now that we've deselected this group, this object has changed. It's no longer on layer 4, it's on layer 1. So keep that in mind. It won't show initially, but if we select, we get the whole group. I'm going to move that back so that we've got all 4 layers again. And now you can see that, it changed colors back to what it was. Now you can ungroup, which is fine if you have a group of objects that you've changed. But keep in mind that even if you ungroup them, it will stay on the same layer. So if I just ungrouped these using the normal process with this button, it would only remove it from the group, but it would keep the same properties as far as a cut goes. There is the Ungroup All button, which is useful for text or an object that has a lot of different objects in it. So text, what I use this for is I do an Ungroup All, and now I can come in here and select one letter. Now what does it do for me? Well, if I want to emphasize a specific letter and say I don't want that to be carved, I want that one to be cut, I can select it, and now this layer, this in particular layer, will be just cut. Now let's see if we actually did it right. And we did. Yay. We'll get back to that button in a minute. So I'm going to revert this back so that all my text is together. So the other thing I wanted to focus on was the show level. The show level is kind of a misnomer because you think that it's showing you the different layers. And in respect it is, but it's based on when the objects were drawn. So you can see that this one is the first layer and it's a cut. This is the second layer and it's a carve. It's the third layer. It's also a carve, and this is a fourth layer. The downside is that when you move these up and down, So we'll move this one up. It changes the order based on how they are in this list. Now, why I say that's a downside is because you don't necessarily want this to be second. I guess it's kind of a feature. Show jumper. Show jumper shows you where the tool path is going to start for each item. So it's going to go from this tool path to this tool path to this tool path to this tool path. Now, in conjunction with that, you can show direction. So it shows you the starting point, and for closed objects, the starting point and the ending point are the same. You can draw a straight line and have a starting point and ending point that are different. Matter of fact, we'll do one of those right now. Now, what happened? Well, we've got a starting point, but I never finished the actual line. So let's go back and try that again. Starting point, ending point. Now I can go continue on because it's a segmented line, or I can hit escape. So you can see there's a starting point and an ending point. But this is the last item on the list. And we'll show that because this was drawn after these other objects. That's why I said this is kind of a misnomer. If you do them in order, it makes a lot more sense. And then as you move them up and down, it changes appropriately. This is important, is that it doesn't necessarily follow the same path once you add a new object. Now that I'm moving these around, you see it reorders the list. So keep that in mind, that as you move the objects around in the parameters, it's going to change what order they're cut in. So now with this one, you can see, since the blue is the top object, it's going to start here and it's going to go around, come to here, then do this object because it's second layer. Third layer, it's going to come and cut this, and then come down to the fourth layer, cut this object, and then come down to what's technically the fifth object, but fourth layer, and it's going to cut this object here, starting with this point. And it shows you the direction it's going to use. This is not always the most efficient either. And we'll get back to that in another video. Show grid. You can set your grid to whatever you want. You can show it. I usually show it. You can hide it. It's perfectly up to preference. Usually this is just used for layout. I don't recommend doing a lot of layout in Autolaser. Using Corel is much easier. But if you don't have Corel, I've done layout in Autolaser, and it's not the easiest thing, but it does the job. Show fill. Now show fill ties into what method you're using, if you're using a cut or carve. If you're using carve, show fill is going to show you the areas that are going to be carved. So right now you see this text is just a vector. It's just a line. But if we click on show fill, we see that all three of these are now engraved. So this is the area that's going to be actually engraved in the unit, or on the material. So you can see this rectangle has no fill whatsoever. So it's just a vector. It's just going to be cut. And based on the parameters here, it'd probably cut through the whole material. This line, again, it's not a closed object, and without it being a closed object, you cannot actually engrave it. It sounds nice, but technically it's not an engraving, it's a cut. So having these two objects selected, I just clicked top alignment. We'll center align them. So this is in the center of the table. The top align moves to the top of the area that is considered the table. If you have this set up to a size other than your table size, it'll bring it just up to the top of the frame. You can take it to the bottom of the frame, and what it does is it puts it right on the edge of that frame. So typically I will take at least one object, put it at the top of the frame and to the leftmost side of the frame. And you see that's a shift over from where it was originally. And the reason I do that is because without an object up in this top corner, when you move this over to export it to the machine, it will cut out a range and it won't be what you expect. The downside to that is that your starting point, you're going to have to actually look for it. It's not going to be the origin where your head is sitting currently. And that can be an issue. But that's something else we'll talk about. So left alignment, right alignment. If you're using a machine that homes to the top right, in other words, furthest away from you to the right, then this is where a lot of people will start. The downside is it really depends on how your machine's set up. You see these selector nodes. In a later video, we'll show you how this applies to where your machine starts. And we'll cover that in an upcoming video. So for now, that's the toolbar that we wanted to cover. Some basic functionality. We'll do other videos on placement, rotation, and then we'll cover some of these other parameters as well.